Dear Vice President of the Alumni Association club.da, Ambassador Brigitta Blaha, dear President of the Rotary Club Vienna, Maria Theresia, Mrs. Tuba Ersoy, dear representative of the Student Association advocating gender equality, dear moderator, Mrs. Vera Budway, dear panelists, in presence and also online, dear ladies and gentlemen, also in presence and online. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's event that we are organizing at the occasion of the International Women's Day 2025. We live in turbulent geopolitical times. We see that some things that appear to have been a certain stable time are changing more than we expected. Some things even undergo a 180-degree change. We see political forces, in particular in the US, putting acquired rights into question and emphasizing that, and here I quote, "It is wrong for men to identify as women," finish the quote, and that, I quote again, "the erasure of sex in language and policy has a corrosive impact not just on women, but on the validity of the entire American system." This text is from the Executive Order on Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the federal government that US President Trump has signed on January 20th this year. Well, this is a real paradigm shift in the gender thinking, which was promoted in the last decades in the US. In Europe, this paradigm shift has not yet arrived, but it is not excluded that it could arrive when one sees the rise of the parties promoting such changes. In order to avoid such extremes in Europe, the question arises whether we should not avoid political correctness ideologies on both sides in our discourses. Otherwise, we will promote a divided society. Let me use this opportunity tonight to update you also about our policy here at the DA regarding gender equality. The Vienna School of International Studies, Diplomatische Akademie Wien, is committed to the principles of gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. To give you some figures where we stand in terms of male and female numbers here, this academic year, 55% of our students are women and 45% are men. In our administration, too, we have more women, with 67% women and 33% men. Only in the faculty, which comprises professors, postdoc language teachers, and teaching and research assistants, we have a slight majority of men, with 52% and 48% women. If we see the development in the student body in the last 30 years, since 1996, we have always had a majority of women in all the academic programs, between 54% and 66%. Since last year, 2024, the DA has a gender equality plan, which is also online on our website. Equal opportunity and non-discrimination matter to us at the DA as a workplace and as central values, and also in the leadership, and also in the decision-making, and in the production and transfer of knowledge. Gender equality and the advancement of women in all their diversity is also a commitment that we share with our main cooperation partner, the University of Vienna. In our gender equality plan, which we have set up last year, we have foreseen concrete actions to be undertaken in the period until 2026. We have set up a dedicated working group composed of representatives of all areas of the Academy, which follows up on the different actions proposed. So here at the DA, we are ready to go forward, and we see more than ever the necessity to ensure that rights for women are not curtailed. We have a very high-level panel tonight with distinguished speakers who have all a great expertise in the area of women's rights. As there's one panelist that is not here in the room, let me greet wholeheartedly this panelist who will join online later, namely Evelyn Regner. She is member of the European Parliament. She has been Vice President of the European Parliament and was also the chair of the Committee of Women's Rights and Gender Equality in the European Parliament. Herzlich willkommen, liebe Evelyn, und danke, dass du teilnimmst. With these words, I conclude my welcoming remarks and wish you all an interesting and pleasant evening. And now I invite Ambassador Blaha to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. I hope this is high enough so that you can hear me properly. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to represent the club.da, the alumni association of the Diplomatic Academy, the Vienna School for International Studies. It's one of the oldest alumni associations in Austria. It was founded in 1969, and its main goal is to enable the next generation of students to receive the same high-quality education its alumni have benefited from since 1964. There are now around 3,000 alumni, and about 2/3 of them have become members. So we have over 1,900 members in more than 100 countries. And we have 15 active local chapters across Europe and the Americas. The club.da supports the ever-growing global network of the DA alumni and connects them with the current students, faculty, and staff. Career services, scholarships, and mentoring are other priorities. We have supported 34 female and 15 male students since 2011 with scholarships. And the mentoring program we are also conducting together with the Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia. The club also organizes regular events, about 40 a year, like the one we are having tonight. And I'm happy that we cooperate for the 4th time with Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia. Since its foundation in 2018, we have cooperated, and we have also a formal agreement that we signed in 2022. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, an ambitious international agreement on women's rights adopted by governments in 1995. The website of UN Women tells us, and I quote, that in reviewing its progress, 24% of countries say that the backlash on gender equality has undermined the implementation of commitments that could unlock equality, rights, and protection for all women and girls. Insecurity, crises, and democratic decay have created a perfect storm of backlash against women's rights. Nearly 3/4 of the world's population are living under autocratic rule that have curtailed rights and freedoms, and over 600 million women and girls live in conflict-affected countries in 2022. This is a rather bleak picture, and I'm glad, as Martina already said, we have a high-level panel tonight to discuss this under the able and experienced leadership of Vera, our moderator. and I wish you all a very interesting evening.
Good evening. I should slightly move, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and students. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all tonight at the Diplomatic Academy for this important Women's Day panel. As the president of Rotary Club, as the honored president of, I should correct myself, Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia, it's a great delightment to open discussion on a subject that deeply resonates with our world today. One step forward, two steps back, gender equality in the times of backlash. On this day, we are not only celebrating the remarkable achievements of women, but also will confront the realities that challenge the process. As Stefan Zweig, one of my all-time favorites, so vividly described in the world of yesterday, how women were pushed behind the scenes, how they were kept in the backstage, and how they were confined to be mothers, wives, and daughters in the beginning of 20th century. Education, professional ambitions, and political engagements were only privileges that were largely reserved for men. However, yet, the change was on the horizon, the movement was gaining momentum, women were entering universities, and a big movement was gaining momentum. And however, as Zweig warns, progress was never guaranteed. And today, as we stand here, we are reminded once more that the struggle for gender equality follows a similar pattern. Just when we think we have moved forward, we face new obstacles pushing us back. The question before us is today, how do we ensure this time at least, this time of the century, the steps forward outnumber those taken back? Again tonight, I'm deeply grateful once more for Diplomatic Academy for hosting this event and to our distinguished panelists for sharing their wisdom and experience with us. Let us use this moment not only to reflect, but to strategize as well, because true progress is not just about taking one step ahead, but it's about ensuring that we never lose the sight of the path ahead us. Thank you once more. Now I would like to hand over to a great, young, inspiring lady, Teanna, the stage.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning to my mom who is tuning in live from Victoria, Canada. My name is Teanna Lackner, and it's an honor to speak on behalf of students advocating for gender equality, also known as SAGE. Thank you to club.da and Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia for inviting us to be a part of this event again. At the Diplomatic Academy, SAGE works to foster a just and inclusive environment for all, promoting gender equality through open discussion, policy advocacy, and activism. We aim for our work to be intersectional, addressing issues of racism, LGBTQ+ rights, women's representation in leadership, and the role of men in advancing gender equality. This intersectionality is an important reminder on International Women's Day, because progress for women must be progress for all. SAGE strives to bring people together, from students to professionals, to raise awareness and build a more equitable future, like we're doing today with our panel. But this future is not guaranteed. Over the past year, we have watched geopolitics shift and conflicts deepen, with devastating consequences for women and marginalized communities. This backsliding on women's rights is a stark reminder that progress is never linear, and that our advocacy is more urgent than ever. We know that when women are included in peace processes, agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. And yet, at the current rate, gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be achieved for another 130 years. This year, we mark two significant milestones: the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the 25th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. These are more than just documents. They're the foundation of the global fight for women's rights and security. They affirmed what women have always known, that equality, representation, and safety are not privileges, but fundamental rights. Thanks to these commitments, progress has been made, yet the struggle continues. As world leaders gather in the coming days for the 69th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, we have a chance to turn decades of advocacy into lasting change. Moments like this remind us that while setbacks exist, so does the momentum to push forward. In times of backlash, community matters more than ever. I want to take a moment to thank the women who've supported me, especially my fellow board members, Marlene, Julia, and Mybrid, and also Sophie, who continue to inspire me with their resilience and determination. Today, as we reflect on the challenges ahead, let's also celebrate the strength we find in each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good evening from my side. I'm Vera Budway, and I will be moderating today's session, discussion, One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, Gender Equality in Times of Backlash. And as a member of Rotary Vienna Media Theresia, I would also like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to the DA and the club.da and SAGE for partnering with us for this very important event. International Women's Day is always a time where we come together and try to reflect on the progress we've made in gender equality. We've been reminded that these are anniversary years of the Beijing Platform for Action, from Security Council Resolution 1325. So we should be reflecting on this progress. However, the question now is in front of us, have we seen progress, or are we really living in a time of backlash, or what I like to call whiplash? As was mentioned, one of the first things US President Donald Trump did when he took office was sign an executive order, not just on the gender identity, but also on slashing funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for government agencies, and rescinding orders that combat racial and gender-based discrimination. And what we saw is many businesses, US-based businesses, were following in line and joining the bandwagon. I can name some of them, but Amazon, Deloitte, Google, McDonald's, Meta, Pepsi, Walmart, just to name a few. So what does this mean for us here, in not only in Austria, but in Europe? What impact is this backlash having? And this is what we're going to discuss today. And I am really honored and delighted to be joined by such an esteemed panel to discuss this topic. Let me just again first introduce to my right Ambassador Annika Markovic, Ambassador of Sweden to Austria and Slovakia, and permanent representative of the Permanent Mission of Sweden to the UN and international organizations in Vienna. Welcome.
Thank you.
As was already introduced, joining us online is Evelyn Regner, member of the European Parliament from Austria. Also, as was already introduced, she had chaired the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality and was Vice President of the Parliament. So we are really honored and delighted to have Ms. Regner join us online. Welcome.
Good evening.
Also, I'm delighted to welcome Karin Fanto, who is the Director of International Markets at Berndorf Bäderbau. She's also Deputy Chair of the Zukunft.Frauen Alumni Club, and Zukunft.Frauen is the women's leadership program of the Ministry of Labor and Economy, the Austrian Chamber of Economy, and the Union of Industries of Austria. So welcome.
Thank you.
And I am delighted to welcome Rudolf Krickl on our panel. He's CEO and Senior Partner of PwC in Austria. Thank you, Rudolf, for joining us. So let's get started. What we're going to do is I'm going to have 2 rounds of questions for our panelists. Then we will open the floor for your questions and reflections, and then close with a closing round from the panelists. So let me start with the first round of questions, and I'd like to start with you, Ambassador Markovic. You are a part of the International Gender Champions Network, which brings together heads of diplomatic missions and international organizations. So we're seeing in many countries, we're seeing a rollback on gender equality and women's rights. So what role do diplomatic institutions and diplomacy play in either resisting or enabling this trend? And what can networks like the International Gender Champions do to keep gender equality on the agenda?
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward very much to participate in this panel. It's, of course, a very topical issue, the backlash that we see happening, and we definitely see it happening in the international organizations here in Vienna, where we as negotiators for our countries, we have to struggle in order to keep language that we agreed upon already many years ago. Of course, this is a special year because, as has been said already, it's 30 years since the Beijing platform was established, and that was really a major undertaking. You know, it's not just gender equality, but it's really pinpointing that we have to work on addressing education, addressing health, economic participation, and political representation of women. And it's also 25 years since the Women, Peace and Security resolution, which was a major shift in the thinking around security and peace negotiations. And I think we have to remember that since 30 years ago in Beijing, that's actually when I started working on gender issues. I was a young diplomat in New York, and I was assigned to the women's rights issues in the Third Committee right after Beijing. And, you know, I remember how everyone was really, so filled with the progress that we had done in Beijing, and really thinking that, now we can solve all the gender equality challenges in the world. And yes, we did make a lot of progress in these 30 years, and now we see a backlash, but let's hope it's only a bump, because there are so many reasons why gender equality is good for everyone, not just for women, but also for men and for the society as a whole. But you were asking me about the International Gender Champions. So what is important, I think, is that women's rights and gender equality, it's not a women's issue. And the gender champions really gather male diplomats, male leaders of organizations in the UN here in Vienna, and also women ambassadors and women leaders. And I think it's only when we work together that we can really make a difference. And we need to celebrate the achievements that we have had, and we need to come together now to really be very concrete about what we must do. And that's what is good about the International Gender Champions Network, because you cannot become a member unless you pledge what you're going to do in the next year, what achievements you want to have. And it's by being concrete and by declaring and putting that up on the website, this is what I'm going to work on, that you can actually make some advancements.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just a follow-up. How do you see this backlash affecting women working in diplomacy? You sort of touched upon that. Do you think they're facing more resistance or fewer opportunities for advancement now than, let's say, years ago?
I can speak for my country, Sweden, and there I don't see that happening. I also don't see it really happening in the UN, so I think that there the opportunities are still there. And I'm looking at my papers because there was a study that was made in 2024 about the numbers. So if I can share some numbers, I think it's important. So despite some progress, of course, women remain underrepresented in the top diplomatic positions. In 2024, 21% of ambassadors and permanent representatives globally were women, so 21%. That showed a small increase from 20.5% in 2023. And of course, in relation to this, it's also important to recognize the noticeable differences between regions, because the Americas have the highest percentage of female ambassadors at 28%, followed by Europe at 27%, and Africa is at 20%. Asia and the MENA region are below the global average with 14% and 10% respectively. And this is from the 2024 Women in Diplomacy Index. So the numbers are not great, and we see small progress, but still you can see progress, which is important. And why does this matter? So gender equality, as I said, is not a counting exercise. It's not just about counting the heads. It's about ensuring equal rights, representation, and inclusion. So including women in diplomatic roles bring diverse perspectives, which then enhances decision-making and better addresses the need of a diverse population. So women's leadership is simply essential for addressing global problems.
Very well put. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. Now let's move to Evelyn Regner online. There you are, great. You chaired the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality and initiated the European Gender Equality Week in the European Parliament. How has the backlash been playing out in legislative spaces like the European Parliament? Have you seen or observed a shift in policies and priorities?
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, that I could join you online right now, that you enabled that. We are, though the elections to the European Parliament took place already more than half a year ago, even longer, so June 24, still we're at the start of the legislative period, as you realized how long it took the Commission came more or less into existence. So what can I say so far? Of course there is a shift, of course there's a backlash, and sometimes I would rather say even it's stronger, that is a pushback of women's rights. We don't see anything on that so far in the legislation because we don't have so many pieces of legislation proposals on the table yet. We're waiting for the, now it's not called more anymore, a gender equality strategy as we had in the last previous legislative period. We're waiting on the roadmap to be proposed from the European Commission. And here it will be proposed on Saturday, so somehow still have to be a little bit patient. But what I get as information from the Commission, there is, for example, a debate on whether there will be SRHR, so sexual reproductive health and rights in the program, or if the rights are pushed out. So somehow we see already that it's getting a little bit slower. Looking to the situation of the European Parliament as such, which is seeing, of course, that this progressive alliance we had in the very successful period concerning gender equality from 2019 to 2024, from EPP, S&D, Renew and Greens is not as strong anymore, and that EPP flirts sometimes quite clearly with the far right, also on women's rights under and gender equality issues as such. So somehow this is something that is in the room. The European Commission is, as the collegial body, so far has a focus according to the political circumstances on competitiveness, we're fighting bureaucracy, simplification, and of course defense. Women's rights to be looked at. What will that mean? Will it be pushed away? But we have to be absolutely alarmed as the proposal to fight the horizontal discrimination, including of course also reasons of gender, but of course of so many other reasons as well, my migration backgrounds, or religion and so on, LGBTIQ, somehow was withdrawn quite slowly, quite silently. We all are aware that this was a tough cookie, but the situation in the council, of course, makes the whole situation quite difficult as well. Let us look at Women on Boards Directive. That was just possible that it came into existence after 10 years of negotiations because the alliance in Germany finally said, okay, let's do that. So the political situation, just to make the whole story short, is a difficult one. But, and I always would like to talk about the good things, we have 4 big pieces of legislation that have been decided in the previous decade. So Women on Boards Directive, Pay Transparency Directive, the equality bodies, and the huge Fighting Violence Against Women package, including the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, that have to be implemented. And quite some deadlines on some of those dossiers are still running. So it will have a huge impact to the better if and when those pieces of legislation are implemented. So we have both actual backlash and at the other side, those pieces of legislation that really make the life of women and therefore also of men better if properly implemented.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and especially that positive note about the legislation that's there, and of course the implementation is going to be the very important piece of that. Let's move now to, I'm going to move to Rudolf, to you. 2 of PwC's biggest competitors are scaling back on their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs due to these executive orders in the US. And while PwC continues to maintain diversity commitments for now. So you're CEO here in Austria. So what is happening? The question is more, is what's happening now in the US with the companies having an impact on PwC here in Austria? And then kind of a follow-up would be, how do businesses navigate the tension between the external backlash and then internal commitments to gender equality? And do you have to adjust your strategies, or have you had to adjust your strategies?
Right. So firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to join the panel and the discussion here. And then coming back to your question, for sure we're closely monitoring what is going on in the US. And the 2 competitors, Deloitte and KPMG, so they are really scaling back or stepping back from their D&I or gender equality strategy. We saw that EY was just disclosing another paper on gender equality and emphasizing that it's really important to stick to the program, and PwC is doing the same, so that makes us happy. But important is that even Deloitte and KPMG firms in the UK posted the last week that they stick to their programs, and that still is a top priority for those territories. And that means that Europe is really significantly different than the United States, and that's also good. That's the one good message. The second one is that we are not a group of companies with a headquarters somewhere. We are networked, meaning that the local companies in the territories belong to the local partners. So we do our own decisions, meaning that we in Austria stick to our D&I strategy as we did before. And it's also even more important as we cannot really leave it or move away or erase it simply because it's woven into our values and our daily acting and working and doing. And the second thing is a strong D&I program is especially important for our business as well, and also for the society and our contribution to our society. Why for the business? Because we have to bring enough talents to our company to work for our clients and together with us. And we see that diverse teams work much better, bring better decisions, work better together, have different perspective, and work out much better than just single gender teams. And maybe some figures, like you had some figures at PwC Austria. We have a quota of all the employees of 51 women and 49 are men. Then on the highest, on our executive board, which is called Territory Leadership Team, we have 1/3, so 2 out of 6 are women. Only the one number we are very, very hardly working on it is directors and partners. There we have a quota of 27%, which is not that bad compared to industry and other economic units, but we still want to improve that, and we are really working hard on that. And how business have to, that's different. So the one thing is business in general. So businesses in general face complex issue of balancing the pressure from the outside and the inside. So they have to bring together the public sentiment, the legal requirements, also have to respond to criticism and meet the expectations of their customers and stakeholders. But for ourselves, we stick to our programs. We have different programs. We have communities at PwC like the Women Network, the Young Board, the Shine Community. We also engage in other organizations like Economy, where we're founding members there, like Women in Law or Diversity Challenge. So we only have to be a little louder about it, talk about more about it, and communicate even better, and stick more to our plans and our strategies. So that's, for up to now, that's our way forward.
Thank you so much for that. Also very encouraging, because as I said in my opening remarks, I was quite alarmed right after the executive orders were signed in the US to see the how many companies, big companies, really jumped on this bandwagon. So good to hear that they're still sticking with the values. Now let's stay with the private sector, and I'm going to move on to you, Karen. Through your work with Zukunft.Frauen, you've probably come across a lot of women from a lot of different industries here in Austria. So from your perspective, what are you hearing? How do you perceive the current backlash? Are you more optimistic that somehow here in Austria, at least the private sector is kind of resistant to this backlash that we're seeing coming from across the ocean? Or are companies slowing down when it comes to gender equality and their gender equality commitments?
Yes, so I do see that there is a backlash, and also thank you from my side for having me. So I'm working in the industry at the moment at the world market champion of stainless steel pools, and I worked before for Nike and L'Oreal, so big international companies. And Zukunft.Frauen has 400 top managers within Austria. So in many companies, I do observe a gender process fatigue. The first, often easy steps, I recognize they have been taken, but now it comes to steps which take more efforts, which would be deeper structural changes. And that's uncomfortable and challenging. And there I see a pushback in some of the organizations. I see we have done enough, and I see even some executives being annoyed about this topic. Also with my international background, I see Austria is lagging behind international companies. In comparison to international companies, let's take an example as Unilever, who have reached their target of having 50% of their employees women in 2020. They reached it already in 2019, and they do have success with this, for sure. They have better products, they have better innovation, and for sure better financial performance. So you asked me if I'm concerned. Yes, I am. I'm concerned, but also optimistic. I'm concerned because I think, or I hear that some say that the gender issue is kind of a luxury problem, which for sure I don't think. But however, I think that the shortage in skilled labor will bring us forward, because it's all about the war of the talent, and I think the ones who will lean in now into this topic, they will have an advantage. So I'm positive for the future when I look to this.
Good, thank you for that. Well, maybe just, actually, we've been talking now about what the current state is in terms of the backlash. And let's now kind of think about what is it we can do right now. How can we address this backlash? So maybe just sticking with the private sector, you mentioned the fatigue. And what do you think that some companies can do to prevent diversity fatigue or fatigue when it comes to talking about gender equality? So how to keep both the employees engaged, but also senior leadership engaged and committed to gender equality in the private sector?
So I think there must be a shift from morality into a business case, because the business case, this is what is interesting it. So we all know that there are several studies that diverse teams deliver more innovative solutions, and that the financial results are better, and I think it is important to communicate about this. So it's not about the moral by having more women into teams, but really about the business case, why this makes sense for the company. So especially in these economic times, companies should view the EA as a competitive advantages and not as a luxury problem. But to come to this, I think it's important to communicate on this business case. Yes, and also think it should be not as a HR topic, I think it should be anchored in the strategy of companies. And also for this, it's important to communicate about companies who have integrated the EA in their strategies and so deliver very good results. As we do also here on the scene, is to engage men as allies. I think this is not something we can do as a women alone. I think this is also the obligation of men whom we should work with. So.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe since I will turn now to you to follow up on that, Rudolf, about strategies. What kind of strategies do you think should be implemented to address this issue of maybe gender fatigue, or perhaps what strategies should be implemented to ensure that gender equality commitments are not just rhetoric, but they're actual tangible changes to workplace culture and representation?
Yeah, firstly, I would like to underline what you said before. It's about the business case and to show that it really makes a lot of sense to have diverse teams. That's the one thing. Then to have your allies and communities, as I said before, that's really important to get your support and bring in more women into the different roles. But if you ask me about the strategies, there are many you can use, but I would like to name the three most important ones. And the first one is, and we are auditors and tax lawyers, to set clear and measurable goals. So to define specific targets for gender diversity in hiring, in promotions, in leadership roles, to ensure accountability and traceability or trackability or trackable results, so that you can really measure what's going on in your company. The second one is integrate gender equality into the company values, like we did many years ago, because embedded gender equality as a core part of the organization's mission is necessary to prioritize it in both decision making on a strategic level as well as on a daily basis. So that's very crucial to be successful on this. And the third one, and we are really putting a lot of pressure on that, is hold leadership accountable for the goals, for reaching the goals, and include the gender equality goals in performance reviews for leaders to ensure top-down commitment, but a real commitment which is honest and not just driven by the pressure we put on. We make a lot of, workshops and bringing people together and to foster the importance of this issue.
I think that was a very important point about how do you hold leadership accountable. So what would you say to business leaders who are hesitant to advocate for gender equality because they fear perhaps the backlash, or now in this atmosphere of backlash, that some might fear really the controversy? So what would you say to them?
that's relatively easy. What I would say to them is that championing gender equality is both. It's on the one hand the right thing to do for the society or from an ethical point of view, but it's also a smart business decision. Because I said before, and what we realized many years ago, with diverse teams you have better innovation, you attract top talent, you get more talents to come to your company or to stay longer with you, and improve decision making, and therefore, as you said before, drive profitability. And they can ease concerns by clearly highlighting the business benefits, setting, and as we said before, measurable goals, and leading by example. So by doing that, they also strengthen the trust of the employees, of the whole group of employees, customers as well, and position their company for the future.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to Evelyn Regner online. For the next question, you had mentioned before the legislation and the positive legislation for gender equality, what we're seeing in the European Parliament. But can you tell us about some successful policy interventions that you have seen that effectively counteract the backlash against gender equality?
I mean, there is a lot we can do. First of all, we have a very successful gender mainstreaming network in the European Parliament. What does that mean? Committee by committee, everybody has to follow just a set, not only of rules, but principles to apply. So, I mean, that's from the micro-feminism, that you just looked at the podiums are gender balanced, that you're, when you're just going through the policies as such, for example, when we worked on the Resilience and Recovery Fund, so when those billions were spent to fight the negative consequences of the coronavirus, the gender equality is enshrined as a principle. It means that when you apply those principles of gender mainstreaming, you do something to the better for both, for men and women, and you do that also in a way that is, let me say, really also just, socially just. Another point I'd like to say to fight successfully is always follow the money. That's one of our principles. We just found out, and there are already facts and figures and everything on the table, that a lot of money from so-called NGOs, private whatever organizations, of which in the US, but also in Russia, were taken into the hands. So I just have to check that always. It was $96 million by US and Russian organizations to finance anti-gender movements in the European Union. So somehow to launch whatever radicalization in social media and so on. And what can we do within this system is, and one of the tools was to introduce anti-money laundering directives. So somehow to fight money laundering and to look via which channels all this money to radicalize is going in is just one tool. Of course, it's then more than fighting anti-gender movements, but there we are then at the basis of defying democracy, and that's what it is about. Everything what we are doing right now in this sense means defending democracy, and therefore measures I mentioned in the beginning, concrete directives that improve women's lives. That's one part of the game, and here we were very successful, so I won't repeat them again, but we really did a lot in the legislative sector, especially to improve the financial situation, financial autonomy of women. But the other pillar is to defend democracy, and that's it. It's the economy stupid. We know that all those fighting gender equality, fighting LGBTIQ rights, they use that in order to look for a scapegoat and use it as a how do you say, a smoke grenade to switch off the other issue, that the differences between rich getting richer, oligarchy on the one side, and the huge part of the population, and women are, of course, more than 50% of the population, are in danger. And therefore, defending women's rights, defending gender equality, doing measures to follow the money, as I mentioned, but on the other side, really going into the positive measures that improve really women's rights, like the Pay Transparency Directive or the Women on Boards Directive, strengthening childcare measures and strengthening SRHR, are both measures also to defend our democracy as such. Insofar, women's rights are always the forefront runners, and therefore it's always far, far more what we are doing when putting measures in order to include women in the economic life, but also to strengthen the position as political leaders.
Thank you so much. You mentioned these funding for anti-gender movements. What can be done really to counter those movements? What can be done more to bring those to light and shed light on the nature of those movements, and how can one, I want to say, counter them or fight them? Because this is really, I think, an important point about following the money.
Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, of course, it's not an easy task because at the moment we see the whole picture. One thing is to really, it sounds like it sounds so simple, but most people simply don't know that it's not something that is taking place, that everybody is saying, okay, it's getting on my nerves, always these genderism and whatever. No, there is so much money that is in there that is channeling the people in order to repeat those arguments, that we're not talking about the real problems that absolutely exist. So we're talking about whatever. So to explain, we had in the European Parliament a couple of hearings, and nevertheless, most European members of the European Parliament still don't know that we just know that, the facts and the figures. I think we have to invite those investigators also to the plenary to give us those facts, that it's really a fact that there are, as I mentioned, US so-called church organizations, but they are whatever, where they are belonging to, cooperating with Russian whatever organizations, and finally they are paid and channeled. So first thing is to make it far more public, to make it visible. That's one thing. The next thing is, we just have it right now, very actual, when we follow what Vice President Vance said, the DSA, the Digital Services Act. This is an important act we were deciding, and that has to be implemented and applied also by US enterprises in order to have a regulatory field that not everybody can say crap or lie or pass money through. So what can we do is insist on implementing those rules we set that have to be also applicable for the United States and all other states, and by this defending our democracy and therefore also defending women's rights. So to make the story short is insisting on that those rules, like the DSA, like the anti-laundering package, is also defending women's rights, is also defending gender equality, is also defending our whole democracy. It's on business, but not only.
Yeah, thank you so much, and also thank you for the excellent work you're doing in the European Parliament. Now, let's move to you, Ambassador Markovic. In international diplomacy, gender equality is often framed as a soft issue. How do we change that perception and ensure that gender equality is really seen as a serious, hard diplomatic issue and not a soft, nice-to-have add-on?
So I think it is a hard issue, but I think it's important to argue the business case for gender equality. And as was said, I mean, the business case is there. Diverse teams perform better. This is true for companies, but it's also true in diplomacy and in the international organizations. And you can find so many research reports on looking into business cases where you can see that diverse teams are performing better. I was working with the OECD, and they have a vast amount of data and reports where you can find all these arguments that you need in order to promote that gender equality is a hard issue and not a soft issue. There are, however, two areas that worries me looking into the future. One is the access to venture capital when it comes to women-run startups or scale-ups. That's still so difficult for women. Even in a very sort of gender equal country or society like Sweden, less than 10% of all venture capital goes to women-led companies. And that is not a soft issue, that's a hard issue. Because since it's true that diverse teams perform better, that is also true for startups and scale-ups. The other issue that is of concern to me is AI. Because the more we start using AI, and we know that bias is going in to AI systems, then bias is also coming out. And I was told a story, I haven't checked if it's correct or not, but I was told a story that if you ask ChatGPT, what is a good girl? Then you will find, a good girl is a girl that helps mom in the kitchen and, all that. And if you instead would ask, what is a good boy? You get a boy that, does things that boys should do, if you look at it from a biased point of view. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think that it really is the example that tells you that AI, if you put bias in, bias will also come out. And we have to be very careful about that now when we are introducing AI as a tool in so many areas of society.
Yeah. No, that is a good point, and there have been a lot of studies on that kind of bias, because who is programming AI?
Yes.
And that's the need we need more women to actually get into the field of developing this type of technology.
Yeah.
And it's not just AI, we see this in other technologies like the metaverse, how are gender stereotypes then replicated in the metaverse, in virtual reality. So these are fields where I think there's still a lot of work, and I think this could be a topic for our next discussion on terms of
And we need to raise the awareness, so that when we use these tools, that we are aware that, they are also telling a story.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think now I would like to open the floor for your questions, your comments. Please, I ask you to introduce yourself, and maybe we'll take a few questions. If you have a question directly to one of the panelists, you can direct it, or in general. I'll take about maybe 3 questions, and then we'll do a round. So maybe we'll have... come to you, Sasha, but first over there, the young lady.
So my name is Andrea. I'm an ETH student here, and I'm from Norway. And thank you for a very interesting talk so far. What I am wondering if you can comment more on is how to deal with all the young boys and men who are turning more and more anti-women, as we just had a debate not long ago in Norway, where we were suddenly almost talking about government prostitution of women because men are so lonely, and it's unfair that only a few men gets to sleep with all the women. And this was a real political debate amongst the youth parties. And I see this as a part of the problems with the Andrew Tate culture and all of this. So how do you deal with the young men who, of course, the issue of male loneliness is a serious issue, but then turn it towards it being women not doing enough or not wanting to be with them or sleep with them?
Thank you so much. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we'll have a round of answers, and then another round of questions. Sasha.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Sascha Monstein. I'm a former president of the Rotary Club Vienna, Maria Theresia, and also a graduate from the Diplomatic Academy. And I'm very proud of this event that every year really continues to surprise me in its depth and the important questions that are discussed. My question is to the entire panel, what is the role of women and what happens to gender equality in times of war? And that seems maybe a new question, because you could say maybe it's exaggerated to think that war is going to arrive in Central Europe, but maybe it will. We are already talking about, a continent that is not sufficiently armed, but that is squeezed between probably two of the most macho world leaders, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I've heard with dismay Mrs. Regner's accounts about the hybrid warfare that is already taking place, specifically and targetedly against these kind of women. Maybe this culture war is part of this war. And if I just may frame the question a little bit, already in Europe is full of women refugees with their children, while the men in Ukraine are fighting the fight for Western democracy. How is this going to play out? What is the role of women in this war we are facing?
Thank you so much for that provocative question. Maybe one more question. Go for you, then I'll come.
Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed every one of the presentations. Laura Rockwood, formerly with the IAEA and now retired for the fourth time. The IAEA, by the way, Rafael Grossi, the Director General, has done a fantastic job, and I think he's almost at.
He is at.
Annika, he's made it.
Yes.
Within time, right?
Yeah.
I would really like to understand, and maybe this is for the people in industry and PwC, what do you think, why has there been such a huge rush, particularly in the US, on the part of private companies to disavow DEI policies? And honestly, I understand those that are heavily dependent on the US government, but why is there this big, huge rush to overthrow DEI programs? And do you have any thoughts about how that can be stopped? And final point, it's so important that the European companies maintain the wall on this. It is so important that we don't, 4 years from now, find ourselves in a world where we're completely back to where we were 30 years ago.
Thank you so much for that question. So now I'm going to turn to the panelists. We have a question on this phenomenon now of these young men and their attitudes towards gender equality. The world of Andrew Tate, as was mentioned, the role of women in times of war, and then more to our representatives from the private sector on, why companies are disavowing themselves all of a sudden or jumping on the anti-DEI bandwagon. Let me go to you, Ms. Regner, online to take some of those questions.
Thank you very much for those fantastic questions. I just tell you, I'll try to give my contribution partly, but if I had the key to all of that, that would be fantastic. So somehow I think we all try to take some pieces and do our best, but we're all learning, and we just have not the one and single answer. To the first question concerning the young men, I think there is a lot to do by all of us. First one, to this Andrew Tate guys and what there is all around. What is forbidden offline must be forbidden online, and that is the principle that we enshrined in the package to fight violence against women. So you can't. It's forbidden to send dick pics. It's forbidden to when you're stalking women. So somehow, when you just put all that down, and there are a couple of description of criminal acts, then you just can also go further and say Verhetzung. I don't know the word right now in English. So somehow, everybody when you're provoking people to do the forbidden to be completely respectless in a way that is forbidden. So of course that has also and has to have legal consequences. We all know how difficult it is to pursue that, but we have to stick to that, and therefore the full implementation of the Digital Services Act is so important. So it's really far more than a piece of legislation that is somehow trying to do the best towards economy. Is also protecting young people, and we have to go very strict in it, really to apply it. But it's on the table, and we have those measures, and we can react at that at European level with competition policy. So we have really tools in order to be strict on that. And therefore, I think the US government right now is quite angry on that. Another aspect in this regard, but I think we shouldn't talk too long, is on these young boys. We had really an excellent report on sexual reproductive health and rights. Then you think, okay, it's just for women. It's not. We included very, very much men. It's also a question on sexual education that is taking place not only at schools. It's a part of the whole society, and we should really follow all that. And the third point is loneliness. You mentioned that we have a huge project on fighting loneliness in the European Union, and that's far more than looking at elder people or whatever. It is really a whole package of horizontal measures going through all DGs, dealing with social affairs, dealing with health questions, mental health questions. So fighting loneliness and doing and cooperating with organizations, taking more or less young people on board is key. And of course, we're in the beginning. Again, it's always on fighting democracy. I think I could answer a lot on the other to the other questions too, but I think I would like to give the floor also to the others, because the inputs were so interesting. Maybe just to this very important point you brought into the situation on women's rights and gender equality in times of war. I really would like to refer to the excellent work that was done by Commissioner Ylva Johansson when the aggression of Putin in the Ukraine started. She was the first one. Before anybody could say something, we have to think about all those women when rape is used and sexual violence and threatening women is used as an instrument of war. This is a war crime. We have to go further, really condemn it as a war crime, and to go for our feminist foreign policy, which of course is right now in a more difficult situation, but more important than ever.
Thank you so much. Maybe I'll turn to you, Ambassador Markovic, to reflect on especially the question about women in role in war.
Yeah, so I could subscribe to everything that was said. Right now, I think legislation is so important when looking at this question of young boys and the loneliness problem, which is in all our societies and is affecting both men and women. It's also something we have to deal with on a national level, but also on a local level. Violence against women was mentioned. I mean, that's another topic that could be a second panel on that. And of course, legislation there, both on the national level and on the European level, is super important. And the education in school. The role of the schools, the role of parents also in the upbringing of boys and girls, super important. On the question of women in war, Sweden decided in the 90s to stop the subscription army that we had and instead go for a professional army. And now it's about 6-7 years ago, I would say, we went back to a subscription army. And then it's equal for both men and women. So we have a gender-neutral subscription. And there are many, many roles in the military that could be played by, or done by women and men equally. So I think you just have to look at it from that side. Gender equality, apply that also to the military. There might be some positions that can only be handled by men. There might be others that could only be handled by women, but they can definitely be enrolled in the defense of the country and of Europe. So I don't see that as a major problem, actually.
Thank you. Maybe now to answer the question or reflect on the question on why do you think, I'll turn to you, Rudolf, why do you think companies, especially those in the US, are just jumping on the anti-DEI bandwagon?
I think that's easy to answer. It's about money, I think, because if you think which companies are doing that, it's 2 out of the big 4. That's Deloitte and KPMG. Why? They have the highest engagements in the public sector. They have millions or trillions, whatever, billions earning there. We have Accenture. They started it and they put it over the whole globe because they are like a group of company and not like a network. So they can give out the order and everywhere around the globe they have to follow. And it's also for the digital companies like Google and Amazon and how you call them. I mean, that's just to follow Trump and to have a good position in the economy and to earn their money. And I think then for them, that's not like to stick with it because of ethical reasons, but to earn more money. So I think that's my explanation. But that's also, therefore, it's important that, as I said before, Deloitte and KPMG UK stepped up and said, no, we are not doing the same like our colleagues do in the US. So, and we stick to diversity and inclusion programs, and it's still one of our top priorities here in Europe and in the UK. And if you know that to the UK companies also you have the Far East and the Middle East territories, so they are included there, so that has quite an impact.
Karen, any reflections on that?
Yes, so I would like to the young lady, so coming from international company like Nike, I think the importance of storytelling cannot be underestimated. So the importance for me is that women stand up and tell their story from their perspective and just influence the internet with it, all of the social media, giving a self-confident story about the point of view of women and just wipe the other story kind of away through influencing, through stories. Also in an ideal world, and I think in the war, we have seen it in World War II, that women can do everything. Unfortunately, in our country, it has had a step back, and we have this, all of the women had this medicine at home, like Women Wonder or something, to digest this step back. But in the East, we have seen that after World War II, the women stayed in mint positions and all of this. So it had a very positive effect in the East of the countries, which hadn't in Austria. So I wanted to add this.
Thank you so much. So I'll take another round of questions. Young lady there.
Hello, my name is Julia Monti. I'm also a student here at the Academy. And so you were talking a lot about shifts and step backs, especially in politics. So I wondered, how do we ensure that gender equality policies remain resilient against these political shifts and don't get dismantled as soon as the leadership changes? And also, if I'm already here, I was wondering, it sounded quite, I don't want to say negative, but it had like a little bit of a negative outlook. So I was wondering if there are any like positive trends or strategies in gender equality that can give us hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Hi, my name is Josephina Tokudogbe. I'm a student at the Diplomatic Academy. Okay, so gender equality efforts sometimes overlook the struggle of marginalized women. For example, refugee women, indigenous women, women in conflict zones, LGBTQ plus persons. I would like to know how gender equality movements can ensure that their efforts benefit all women and not just women in privileged spaces.
Thank you very much for that question. I think you have that.
My name's Harvey Zoden. I'm an American. Obviously, you can hear. I want to make a comment. I worked for President Carter. I was the vice president of APC Television. We lived in a hopeful time back then, half a century ago. But today, I think that President Trump, in a perverse way by the law of unintended consequences, has done the EU a favor. Because you can offer such a contrast to what he is doing, and also you can distinguish yourself and exercise a strategic autonomy, not only with regard to China, with regard to Ukraine, but also on the issue that we're discussing tonight. So I hope you can take this opportunity and show that Europe is, like President Reagan used to talk about, a shining city on a hill, not what we have today. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Encouraging comments.
Maybe one more question from this side. Yep.
My name is Denise. I'm also a second-year student here at the Diplomatic Academy. And maybe the US aside, in recent years, I think we have also seen a noticeable backlash towards the term feminism or being a feminist, especially also in Austria. I'm thinking about former Minister of Women, Susanna Raab, who very explicitly didn't want to be called a feminist. So my question would be, why do you think some people are hesitant to call themselves a feminist and to embrace this label as well? And should we move beyond those negative connotations and just drop the term altogether? And maybe to conclude, would you call yourself a feminist? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now to the panel. We have, first of all, about feminism. Do you call yourself a feminist? Then we also have, is there something positive, now positive trends in gender equality, as we've been talking about the backlash. And then the question concerning, I understood the inclusivity of, is gender, ensuring that gender equality benefits women in all their diversities, also marginalized women. So I will now maybe start with you, Karen.
Thank you. So I would like to come back to your question, and I would say don't be discouraged by setbacks because it shows that we had always resistance and that we moved forward nevertheless. So just talking about numbers, we had in 1988 the last canton in Switzerland where it was to be voted. So it's not a long time. In 1917 in Austria we had the right to vote. In 1975, I was already 5 at this time. My mother got the right so to decide on her own to go to work. It was not my father anymore to decide, due to the Bürgerlichen Gesetzbuch in Austria. So there we are moving forward. We're having backlash, but I'm sure we're moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes, I would agree. We are moving forward, definitely. And I'm just looking back at how it was when I started working on gender issues 30 years ago. We have definitely moved forward. So also the fact that we are so many women leaders now, and I was gathering and invited all my women ambassador colleagues at the UN, together with my colleague who is also a female ambassador to the OSCE, and we invited all our female colleagues. We were more than 50 who came to the reception, and we used that opportunity to celebrate ourselves and the achievements that we had made, the plus 50 of us. And just that is, an important achievement, that we are now that many. So that's important. Am I a feminist? Yes, I'm definitely a feminist. I graduated as a parent when my youngest, who is a son, was about 15. And he was asked the question if he was a feminist. And he looked at the person who asked and said, yes, of course, I'm a feminist, because feminism is just about gender equality, right? And then I said, yes, I've graduated as a parent. With gold stars.
Excellent. Yes. Are you a feminist, Rudolf?
I don't think so, but I support women. No, I'm not a feminist, but to add on this, I think we made a lot of progress over the last decades, and that's very important and that's good. But for my feeling, for my impression is that we significantly slowed down over the last years. And in defining our social model in Europe, how we progress as a society in a whole, in all the territories or countries in Europe, in the European Union, especially because here we have a closer ties, we could significantly speed up and have more definition on that. And I think we see a backlash or a shift back to old role models, like nationalism, like common roles, old roles, like how women and men should behave, and that also bring back the war to Europe. And I think there we should significantly speed up, speak out loud, and find our way forward much faster than we do right now.
Thank you.
And on that, I think we have to also speak much more about women empowerment in Europe, because that's also backtracking. And I think if I look at the case of Sweden, what we did was to give equal access to education to all women, and then we invested a lot in childcare. And I think that gave the opportunity for women to access the labor market and then to have your own money that you could decide upon what to do with yourself. And that's women empowerment.
That's super important.
It has to be economic empowerment of women.
Childcare at the early stage, that you come back to work, that you have a high quality childcare, women empowerment. And I'm not a fan of quotas for executive boards or other boards, but it's important to bring women in there.
Great. Ms. Regner, over to you.
Of course, I'm a feminist, and I really would like also to thank very much for this intervention concerning what does it mean, to be from more underprivileged groups, because I'm deeply convinced it's not only about the privileged feminism. So the Women on Boards Directive, for example, was something great, but we should also go look deeper and go for the for other inequalities. So somehow to be very much aware of that, and also the circumstance that we have that right now on the table, that, for example, the Transparency Directive that said equal pay for the equal work and work of equal value has an intersectional part in it. So what would like to say to all of those who just raised their voice and brought in those fantastic inputs is, I'm deeply convinced that in Europe, our societies are already far further than sometimes the public debate. And of course, the public debate is disgusting in many senses, but the society is already went a beautiful, a fantastic path. And our younger generation is far more not only aware, but simply living diversity, even those who have a more maybe conservative background concerning the attitudes. So he went the path, and I think it's so important to put it on the table. We really did already gorgeous work, but of course, the more we deal with it, the more we see also all those other inequalities that exist when you're just a woman that has a migrant background, or when you're a woman that has a background being, for example, ill or having a handicap. So we went already really a beautiful path, and I'm so deeply convinced that right now what's happening, these provocations that are existing, and of course also war, which is really something terrifying, but that brings us all also closer in our different approaches we have about feminism. I had today a wonderful meeting with representatives, the First Minister of Wales is here, and we had meetings with the representatives from the UK government. And I just think in this situation, also on feminism, on gender equality, those who have been sometimes not so closely together are coming closer. So somehow also using this backlash situation on looking on that, what unites us. And gender equality is a basic value of the European Union. So let's go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have time just for one more question, and I saw Barbara had her hand up before, so I'm going to give you the last question.
Thank you so much. My name is Barbara. I'm also member of the Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia, also former alumni of the Diplomatic Academy. My question comes from my own experience. So I'm a full-time working mom of 2. And what I experience is that there are, in my bubble, there are not too many families or too many couples who manage to really equally co-parent, share the mental load of having kids and work. And then I see on my social thread the content of traditional wives, which is getting more and more. I don't know if you're aware of that. Traditional wives glorify motherhood, having more, I don't know, some have more than 10 kids, stay at home, they love to do everything without electricity. This is the one side. The others glorify having just the perfect setup for their kid. And this is, I mean, coming from America, but this is also in Europe. And I see it also in my bubble that women glorify motherhood. They like to stay home, they like to support their men, so they like the traditional roles. In my bubble, I don't see too many women fighting or being proud of handling or kind of trying to do both worlds. And so my question is, what we see now on the political side in America, is this maybe also somehow feeding what we see on the social side? So it's not just the political way, backlash, but also what we see on our maybe the society, which is like a split. We have different kind of eras or wakes within our society.
Okay, thank you for that question, and maybe we can use that question also to kind of wrap up. So I will ask all of you maybe to address that point of the kind of social backlash that's going on at the same time as the political backlash, what that means, how you see it, and maybe just a concluding thought. So I'll hand over to you, Ambassador.
Oh. Yeah, so I don't think that movement is going to grow very fast. So I'm not very afraid of that. I think those of us who have worked our whole life and have a family, we can talk about that too, and it works. I mean, I have 3 children, they are now grown up. I have a husband since 40 years, we are still together, and I've done a career, and this is my 5th ambassador post, so you can do it. And I think that's something that we have to promote as well and not be shy about. To the young diplomats, to the students, I would want to give just 2 or 3 points of advice, or what is my experience. And that is that you should choose your boss wisely. Because the boss that you have, especially when you move to an embassy, is much more important than what country it is in. So choose the boss first and then the country. And then don't be afraid to make a career, because once you become the boss yourself, be it the ambassador or at home in the ministry, you have middle level chiefs or what have you. It becomes easier because then you can delegate. That has always been my experience. When I've had the chance to delegate, then I could control my own time much more, and that you can do when you are in management positions. So don't be afraid of that. Go for that. And then find a mentor. And the mentor can very often be a woman, because if she's older than you and she's more ahead in the career, she can give you good advice because she knows what will be the problems. So those would be my small advices.
Thank you very much, and very good pieces of advice. Over to you, Ms. Regner, for your thoughts. Also, if you could give one piece, or if you have more, of advice to the young women sitting here in the audience today.
Be visible.
Yeah.
My advice is to be visible. So don't do the work always that is not seen. So simply be visible. Talk about what you're doing. So the threadwives, that's just an intimidation, creating a picture of women that never existed. Go for financial autonomy and just look around at the role models, or try to be also a role model that is an inspiration. We just try in the European Parliament, I just say that because of mentioning the question always with the childcare issues and why we don't have so many female mayors, for example. We just try to not only encourage women, but especially male members of the European Parliament to bring for a vote, for example, their little child with them. So somehow to encourage men, we're always talking about gender equality, so what their role could be. Then what's that? A wonderful new man versus the threadwife image that is not having financial autonomy. So if there is one advice, be visible, be seen.
Great piece of advice. Thank you. Over to you, Rudolf, for your thoughts and your one piece of advice to our audience.
My thoughts are very comparable to what was said right now. So own your voice and advocate for yourself. Be seen. Take your place. Don't wait for permission or validation. And on the other hand, look for mentors, women or men, even also men would support, and that's very important. Allies who will support you, and go your way, and don't be afraid to make a career and manage your life. But to come back to the question before, and I mentioned it before, I see the risk that we are moving back in the society to old role models, and I think that has not too much to do with the development in the US, because that's quite new and just a couple of weeks old or 2 months. But that happened before already in the EU or in Europe, and I think there, like women like you are here, who are very successful, should be the role models and speak out more loudly. And in the European Union and in Europe, we have to find a way forward to define our social model, maybe to redefine it a little bit.
Thank you so much. And Karen, over to you for your final thoughts.
Thank you. So, according to what you have said, I would like to start with the movement. So I think, once again, the storytelling, the being visible, the promoting of our way of life, of being independent, of not having a gender or pension pay gap of 40%, of doing what you want when you want. I think it is very important to tell this story, to promote this story, to be visible with these stories against the other stories. Then choose your boss, but also choose your partner. So I'm very thankful to my partner who stays at home, who takes care about our daughter, and who does all this invisible work. And sometimes it is hard, because this invisible work, it comes to the same point for your partner when it's done, not only for us women, it's the role, it's not the work. And so the advice would be, don't wait for the perfect moment that somebody brings you on a silver plate. Take your place, claim it. Be visible and build alliances also with men.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our panel discussion. This has been really, really interesting. We probably could sit here for another couple hours and discuss. There will be an opportunity then for you to interact with the panelists and to continue the conversation. We're going to have a little reception next door. But first, let me take this opportunity to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Ambassador Markovic. Thank you, Ms. Regner. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rudolf. It's been truly, truly inspiring to have all of you here. And thank you again to the DA, Club DA, and SAGE. And I wish everyone a very, very inspiring evening and networking time now next door. Thank you.